Okay, I get it. I was stringing you along. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. In this video, we're going to learn some more powers of string. Just like list, string has some methods that make it much more useful to us if we use them. And when I say methods or powers, I'm always just referring to the same thing. An object that we want to work with or modify, the dot operator, the method we want to use, and in parentheses, any parameters we have to supply. Of course, don't forget that there's really no intuitive way to definitely know what needs to actually go in a method's parameters or arguments, so you're going to rely on either documentation or me for that. I'll always provide you tables that describe that. And some of the methods that we're going to see in this video do not actually take any parameters. So again, no intuitive way to know that. Just sort of keep up with the documentation. And again, I will supply you those things that you need to know. But let's get to some methods. All right, so I have two instructions in a while loop here. They're going to help us to test some new things we know about strings and some new methods that we're going to learn. We're not going to deal with the first input just yet. We're actually going to look at the second one, because we want to be able to handle whether or not the user actually enters a capital or lowercase n here in order to finish our loop. So if we're going to ask them if they want to enter another set, and if they don't want to, then we want to either handle the upper or lowercase n. So I can start my if and condition here. I can say if response.lower, I'm going to force it to be lowercase, temporarily be lowercase, in order for me to evaluate if in fact it is a lowercase n. And so we should be able to enter either an upper or a lowercase n and be able to jump out of our loop if we break. So let's test that. So this looks like we have the ability to put in for first boss, Claude, and scoop. And now I should be able to test if I enter an uppercase n, that it will still break out of my loop. And if I hit enter, we notice that the number to the left of the code block increments, which tells us that in fact it does end. And so it looks like my lowercase trick here worked. I temporarily forced the letter to be lowercase, so I compared it against its lowercase version in order to be able to jump out of my loop. But conversely, I should be able to say, well, I can force it to the uppercase version of what it is and look for uppercase n. And so if I were to shift enter to run this, and again, enter the boss, Claude, and scoop, if I now use a lowercase n, I should be able to get the same result. And I hit enter, and I do. Notice that the code block executes, and the number appears in the brackets to the left of my code cell. One thing to note here is that capital N and lowercase n are actually distinct characters. You may have noticed that when you were looking at the ASCII table in the last video, but if you didn't, that's true. Because the computer doesn't understand letters in the same way that we do, those two symbols are dramatically different. So let's imagine the following not so unreal case. All I am telling users to do is enter values separated by a comma. So I might get lowercases, uppercases, comma, space, space, comma. I might get all sorts of different variations of the strings here. And in fact, I could get a user that enters boss, space, capital Claude, scoop, space, comma, lowercase Claude, and then doesn't want to enter another set. But I want to find all the Claudes in this particular string. So I can still break out all of my members to the crew, split. I'm going to split it on just the comma, because that seems to be the most precise thing, because that's all I instructed the users to do. Now, in the previous section, I didn't talk about it this way, but this value is technically called the delimiter. It's the thing that allows me to limit or put edges to what constitutes a name. And in this case, it is a value that's separated by a comma. So I'm going to shift enter and print members. And you notice I get a kind of motley crew here. I get lowercase boss, space, capital Claude, scoop, space, and then Claude lowercase. But I want to find both Claudes, and they don't both begin with a capital C, and in fact, one begins with a space. We can use two methods to do this. First, we're going to strip off the spaces on either side of the names themselves, and then we're going to combine forces with some methods we already know in order to test for whatever representation of Claude we want to use. So I'm going to say for name in members, I'm going to redefine as name gets the value of name.strip, which allows me to take spaces off either side of any of the words that I have in my list. So space Claude, space gets stripped from the left side. Scoop space, the space gets stripped from the right side. So I'm looking for if name dot lower, so the lowercase version of the name, because I have upper and lower, but I want to standardize them so I can make a test that I know will cover both Claudes. I'm going to use starts with as a chain here in order to say if the lowercase version starts with a C, because again, I'm forcing it all lowercase, and I'm saying, is it a lowercase c at the beginning of the name? Then I can print, oh, that's Claude. Else, print, that's not Claude. I should get 2, correct? If I look at this, boss is not Claude. Then the second one should be Claude. The third one is not Claude. And the fourth one should be Claude. So if I shift enter, I get that's not Claude, boss. Oh, that's Claude. Okay, there was a space and a capital there, so it looks like it worked. That's not Claude for Scoop, because Scoop is not Claude. And Claude as the last one. Now again, what I notice here is that I am allowed to do a couple of things. First, we learned a new method called strip that takes the spaces off, but I want to call your particular... So a couple of things here. First, we learned a few new methods, but strip being one of them, what we really also learned... I don't know. So a couple of things here. We learned a couple of new methods, but we also learned something that's very important. We can chain things together, much in the same way that we can wrap our inputs in an in function, or we can wrap other functions in functions. We can also chain methods together to work sort of in the order that we read them left to right. So if name.lower, the lowercase representation of a word, starts with a certain letter, then we can take action. So we can start to become much more detailed in the way that we take in inputs, but also in the way that we can handle how those inputs get evaluated in conditions or in any of our other statements. And while it seems like I'm just showing you a few things at a time, one thing to remember about programming is that there are so many different functions and methods that it would actually be impossible and impractical for me to teach you them all. I'm going to teach you some of the ones that are more common to the work that we generally do, but you're going to find as you deepen your experience and knowledge in programming that there are so many more out there that might actually suit your use case better. But what we're not doing is we're not changing the rule set all too much. We're challenging some assumptions, but we're really saying that in terms of methods, for example, all we're doing is the object we want to work with or modify, dot, some other thing that we want to do with it, whatever method or power we want to invoke. And in some cases, we can even add on another dot to work more specifically with the outcome of the previous operation. Now, in the next video, we're going to expand our ability to use functionality by including how to use files.